Beneath the infamous gate of Auschwitz-Birkenau today, a band played a lament written by a Jewish composer who arrived at this very gate in 1944, was selected for death and murdered in a gas chamber. Music to remind those seated amongst the survivors that the Holocaust is not a story of those who lived. The norm was of death. 6 million Jews murdered, nearly 1 million of them at Auschwitz.
On an icy, windy day, I stood and watched helplessly as little girls from the nearby barrack were marched away crying and shivering to the gas chamber. Is my barrack next? I silently wondered. I thought that we all have to die, that it was normal. If you're a Jewish child, you have to die.
Among the remaining 56 survivors here, 98-year-old Marian Tursky. Once treated as subhuman by the Nazis on this very ground, now he could call on the leaders of the world to stand and offer their silence. Kings and presidents were here not to speak, but to listen and light candles as they were warned about the lessons of history.
I repeat, therefore, be attentive and be vigilant. We, the survivors, we understand what the consequences of being considered different is: active persecution, the effects of which we have personally experienced on our own skin. So let us be very serious. Let us take seriously what the enemies of democracy preach.
80 years ago, this was the scene that greeted Soviet soldiers at Auschwitz-Birkenau. Survivor and writer Primo Levi wrote, "If I could enclose all the evil of our time in one image, I would choose this: an emaciated man, with head dropped and shoulders curved, on whose face and in whose eyes not a trace of a thought is to be seen." Auschwitz was the culmination of Nazi ideology, brutality and depravity. And in trying to comprehend the sheer scale of the Holocaust, we must also remember the murders that took place outside of the concentration camps, the hundreds of thousands of Jews who died of starvation and famine in the ghettos, the more than 1 million who were shot dead in mass executions by the Nazi death squads. 6 million stories of evil. 6 million reasons to say never again.
In fact, a lot more happened than I can ever tell.
So there are some things you...
Well, some things I can't repeat. I never repeat how my mother and sister were killed. Yeah.
Marla Tribich knows every aspect of Nazi evil. She experienced the ghetto, the mass shootings, the camps. A survivor of Bergen-Belsen, she lost her mother, father and sister.
I was a young girl and I remember the fear. I recall one particular time where I knew we had looked out the window and there were all the lorries there and lots of German soldiers, and we immediately, well, I became so scared, and you could hear them coming up the stairs, and it was terrifying for children, and we had to face these atrocities. We actually couldn't avoid them.
Marla is the only British Holocaust survivor at today's commemoration. The task is to keep their memories alive and remind future generations this was not just about one country's pursuit of annihilation, but a collective failure of Europe to prevent genocide.
The Holocaust did not happen in one particular place. Understanding the breadth of where the Holocaust reached, of where this all took place, helps us understand that it didn't happen somewhere else to somebody else, committed by somebody else. Actually, it's our history.
Jews from France to Norway to Greece were sent to their deaths here, a transnational crime, a reminder amidst transnational rises in populism, the far right and anti-Semitism. This was morning at Block 11 in Auschwitz. Elderly survivors shuffled, where once prisoners were marched and shot dead against this wall. Does it ever get any easier coming back to places like this?
No. It kind of stirs it up a bit. But I often think about it, obviously. It's part of my life.
If today is a reminder of humanity's evil and to say never again, remember then where we are now. Because it was a Soviet battalion made up not just of Russians, but Ukrainians too, who liberated Auschwitz. And it is the Russians who are not invited. Instead, it is the Jewish president of Ukraine who is now the symbol of resistance against authoritarian extremism, and who was applauded as he lit a candle in memory. The remembrance of the past is one thing. The lessons learned from it, something different entirely.
Kieran Woodley with that special report from Auschwitz. Well, earlier I spoke to the German ambassador to the UK, Miguel Berger, and I asked how Germany can keep remembering such an important day when those who witnessed it are dying out.
Yeah, Matt, I think, as you say, it's a very important day, 80 years since the liberation of the Auschwitz extermination camp. And in Germany, we have, over the years, built up really a culture of remembrance, which means not only to accept Germany's historic responsibility for the Nazi atrocities and crimes, but also to work towards a better future in the sense that we want to stand up for democracy, for rule of law, for human rights, not only in Germany but everywhere.
We'll get to those universal values in a minute, but just on the Holocaust itself, although Germany has been teaching school children and the public has been educated about the horrors of the Holocaust, the statistics today are quite alarming, aren't they? I think 1 in 9 children didn't even know there was such a thing as a Holocaust. A quarter can't name a single concentration or extermination camp. That wasn't part of the plan, was it?
Yeah, you are right, Matt, that it is in the sense that the survey shows that it's a constant work to educate new generations, and the survivors have played a very important role, because there is nothing as to listen to a survivor, his individual story about the horror they went through. And now that regrettably the memory of the survivors is fading away, we need to find new ways for education. But Matt, on the other side, let's see that 8 out of 9 Germans know about the Holocaust also gives me some hope. But it will be a continued task of education, not only in Germany, I think in many other countries too.
I wonder to what extent the remembrance of the Holocaust is also complicated by the political landscape in Europe, but especially in Germany. Is there a danger that Holocaust denial is creeping into German politics?
I hope we can avoid Holocaust denial coming into politics. We have to stand up against any attempts to try to draw a line under the Holocaust and under this history. We have to stand up against these attempts and put our focus on democratic education and fight back against those people who think that they can, reduce that, as you said, to a small episode in German history. It is not, and I know that the vast majority of Germans see it the same way as I do, as a constant task of education and remembrance.
So in the middle of this very febrile political atmosphere that you have in Germany, you have Elon Musk, who, of course, we know has a thing about our Prime Minister here in Britain, but he's also been incredibly rude about your Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, and has been campaigning openly for the AfD to win these elections in an extraordinarily brazen way. What is your message tonight to Elon Musk?
Let me say about, opinions like the ones or the rallies of Elon Musk supporting the AfD. He is free as any other person to voice his opinion. The concern in German politics, and I think in others too, is when algorithms are manipulated or are used to strengthen and to reinforce hate messages or conspiracy theories or favoring one political party over others. If that would happen, then we would see this as an interference in our democracy and in our electoral system.
Well, given the world of today, given what's been happening in Gaza in the last 15 months, there are many people who say that Germany has been so supportive of the Israeli government, it has failed to condemn, acts that many people would describe as genocide or violence against innocent Palestinian civilians when they occur.
Germany has been very critical of the humanitarian situation in Gaza, but Matt, I would really not like to mix up the horrors of the Holocaust with the very dire and difficult situation in Gaza. Germany, for us in Germany, it has been so important to see that Jewish life has come back to our country. And we see it as a task and as a result of the Holocaust that we have to stand up against not only anti-Semitism, but all forms of racism and hatred. And that's what we try to do, and also in situations of conflict around the world. I'm worried about attempts, to trivialize the Holocaust or to call, everything that happens, terrible things that happen in the world, immediately a genocide. So we have to be very careful about our language, and I would not like to mix up the Holocaust with any other, international event or war that is taking place.
Ambassador Miguel Berger, thank you very much indeed.